The nebula stretched out like a cosmic storm, a swirling maelstrom of shimmering gases and violent electromagnetic pulses. To the alien explorers aboard the Vrithax, it was both a prize and a nightmare, a place whispered about in star charts and ancient legends, said to hide relics from civilizations long extinct. Captain Rilthak stood at the bridge's observation window, eyes narrowed against the kaleidoscope of colors and flickering energy. The Deep Space Survey mission had been routine until now. The crew of the Vrithax's sleek, elongated ship with smooth, iridescent hull plating had been charged with mapping the outer fringes of their empire's territory, cataloging new resources, and, above all, recovering any lost technology. Approaching target coordinates, Rilthak announced, voice steady but tight. Around him, the bridge hummed with quiet activity. Crew members tapping consoles, scanning data streams, sensors picking up heavy interference. Said Yalik, the ship's chief engineer, eyes glued to his readouts. The nebula's energy is destabilizing the power grid. If this keeps up, it could fry the main reactors. Rilthak nodded grimly. Keep the shields at maximum. Divert power from non-essential systems. Garlic's fingers danced over controls, trying to reroute energy. As alarms began to chirp softly, the ship shuddered faintly, a warning the crew barely registered yet. Suddenly, a violent jolt threw everyone off balance. The Vrithax groaned a deep, metallic groan that echoed through its frame as if the very ship was in pain. Impact. From... What? Rilthak demanded, voice sharp. Galac's face paled. It's not an impact. It's an energy surge. The nebula is discharging a massive pulse, much stronger than predicted. It's frying the engines. The bridge exploded into frantic activity. Red warning lights bathed every face in urgency. Rilthak gripped the rail, forcing himself to stay calm. Shields holding, he barked. Dropping fast, said the tactical officer. Power levels at 30%. Engine output. Rilthak's heart hammered. Engines offline. We're dead in the water. The words hit the crew like a hammer blow. Floating adrift in a cosmic storm with no power meant one thing's low. Inevitable death. Yalik's voice dropped to a harsh whisper. Life support is stable for now, but reserves are limited. Without engines, we can't control our trajectory. We're at the mercy of the nebulous currents. Rilthak's mind raced. The Vrithax was their home, their lifeline. If they lost her, they lost everything. Send out the distress beacon. Make it loud and clear. We need help, he ordered. The comms officer quickly initiated the signal. A crackling, desperate call echoed out through the void, faint and fragile but unmistakable. Minutes stretched into agonizing hours. The crew clustered in tight groups, faces drawn and eyes hollow. Their instruments scanned the endless black floor. A response, but none came. Fear began to unravel them. Whispered rumors of ancient creatures lurking in the nebula. Stories of ships that vanished without a trace. These thoughts gnawed at their nerves. In a cramped, dimly lit crew quarters, Lieutenant Rinnell clutched the cold metal of her console. She stared at the blinking light that indicated dwindling oxygen reserves. Her breath came shallow. "We can't last long like this," she murmured. "If no one comes..." Her words trailed off into silence. No one dared finish the thought. Back on the bridge, Captain Rilthak forced a veneer of control. We survive by staying together, by keeping hope alive. But inside, he felt the crushing weight of isolation. This wasn't just a failed mission, it was exile, a death sentence wrapped in silence. Suddenly, a sharp beep startled the bridge. The comms officer's eyes widened. "Captain." Incoming transmission weak, but it's there. Static filled the speakers before a crackled voice broke through in an unknown dialect. The aliens exchanged anxious glances. It wasn't from their fleet. Jarlek leaned in. It's a human ship. Humans, the species most feared and revered across the galaxy. Known for their unpredictable nature, resilience, and the baffling willingness to take on impossible odds. Rilthik's throat tightened. The faintest flicker of hope had just pierced the void. "Open a channel," he ordered. The crackling voice became clearer, the accent sharp but calm. "This is the Starship Odyssey. We received your distress call. Help is on the way." A murmur rippled through the crew. Some eyes gleamed with disbelief, others with cautious optimism. Captain Rilthik allowed himself a rare smile, but real. For the first time since the Vrithaks were stranded, the void felt a little less empty. Asterisk, the Vrithaks still drifted helplessly in the swirling chaos of the nebula. But now the faint promise of rescue loomed like a fragile lifeline. "Captain." Rilthik paced the bridge, eyes sharp but burdened. Though the human ship Odyssey had responded, the long hours of silence had worn thin the nerves of his crew. Hope was a double-edged sword. "Status report," Rilthak demanded. Stopping by the engineering console, Gaelic's fingers hovered over the controls, his jaw clenched. "Power levels remain critical. Life support is holding, but only just. We have enough oxygen for 4 days if we conserve." 4 days, ... Rilthik echoed bitterly. "If Odyssey doesn't get here in time, it won't matter." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. The Vrethax's crew was well trained, but none had ever faced the slow, suffocating certainty of waiting to die. In the cramped mess hall, Lieutenant Rinnell sat alone, fingers trembling over a datapad. She replayed the moment the distress signal went unanswered, the silent hours stretching into an endless abyss. She glanced at the blinking light on the oxygen monitor. Every breath now was a silent bargain with death. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts, a message from the bridge. "Lieutenant, your presence is requested." She stood and left the small room, heart heavy. Back on the bridge, Rilthak gathered the senior officers. "We need to prepare for every possibility. We cannot count on rescue arriving intact." He nodded grimly. "If the Odyssey is damaged or delayed, we must have contingency plans." "Agreed," Rilthak said. "We may have to abandon ship. Escape pods are limited and only have minimal life support." Tensions were rising among the crew. Some whispered doubts about the human stories of reckless earthlings who sometimes abandoned allies in peril, or worse, exploited them. Others clung desperately to the hope of rescue. Suddenly, the comms officer interrupted. "Captain, I'm receiving an encrypted transmission from Odyssey. They want to establish secure communication." Rilthik gave a curt nod. "Patch it through." The bridge filled with a holographic projection, human captain. Face weathered and resolute, framed by the sleek interior of the Odyssey. His voice was calm but carried the weight of command. "I'm Captain Mirror Hayes of the Odyssey. We've been tracking your signal. Our engineers believe they can stabilize your engines enough to tow you out, but the nebula is dangerous. We'll need your cooperation." Rilthak exchanged glances with his officers. "Understood, Captain Hayes. We will do everything possible." "Good," Hayes replied. "Prepare for our approach. We'll be entering the nebula shortly." As the hologram faded, a new wave of unease settled over the nebula's unpredictable energy bursts were as much a threat as the drifting void. Gaelic Rilthek said quietly, Can your team withstand another surge? Gaelic's eyes darkened. We can't guarantee it. The ship's already strained. To the limit? Then we can only hope the humans arrive before the next wave. Hours passed in tense silence. The nebula's glow pulsated outside, the swirling gases casting eerie shadows across the bridge. Crew members monitored sensors and whispered prayers to forgotten gods. In one corner, Rinell quietly consoled a young technician whose hands shook. Stay focused. We'll make it through this. But what if we don't? The technician whispered, tears welling. Rinell swallowed hard. Then we'll face that moment together. Suddenly, the ship jolted violently. Alarms screamed. Energy. Surge. Brace. Rilthak shouted. The Vrithax groaned as another blast of electromagnetic radiation slammed into its hull. Power flickered. The lights dimmed and brightened erratically. Hull integrity dropping. Yalek shouted. If this keeps up, we'll lose the mainframe. Rilthak gritted his teeth. Divert all remaining power to shields. Every available hand, prepare damage control teams. The crew scrambled. Emergency lighting bathed the corridors as automated repair drones deployed. Rinell joined the damage control unit, racing through twisting passageways filled with sparks and smoke. Down in engineering, Gaelic and his team worked frantically, patching circuits and stabilizing failing reactors. Sweat dripped down Yalik's brow as he jammed a makeshift stabilizer into place. We can hold for now, he muttered, but this is only buying time. Hours felt like days as the Vrethax battled the nebula's fury. Then, just as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them, a distant pulse appeared on the sensors. Odyssey's signal, the tactical officer gasped. The human ship was close enough to risk a dangerous approach through the worst of the nebula's storms. Rilthak stared at the flickering blip. Rescue was near, but the final challenge loomed. Would the Odyssey make it through the cosmic tempest? And could the two ships work together before the Vrithax's systems failed completely? For the first time in days, a fragile spark of hope ignited across the bridge. But in the depths of space, hope was a precious and perilous thing. The Vrithax quivered as the swirling nebula battered its already weakened hull. Outside, bolts of violent blue energy tore through the cloud like lightning in a storm, illuminating the starship in harsh, flickering light. Every pulse threatened to rip them apart or, at least, snuff out the fragile life within. On the bridge, the crew was tense but alert. Captain Rilthak's jaw was clenched so tight it ached. The faint ping of approaching ships on the long-range scanners was the only thing keeping despair at bay. Odyssey is entering the nebula, announced the communications officer, her voice barely above a whisper. Rilthak nodded. Make all preparations for docking or towing. We'll need to move quickly. Yalek stared at his console, watching the erratic spikes in power drain from the ship's failing systems. We're hanging by a thread. If they're too slow, we lose propulsion completely. Suddenly, the comms crackled. Vrithax, this is Captain Myra Hayes of the Odyssey. We're closing in. But this nebula is unlike anything we've encountered before. Our shields can't absorb prolonged bursts of electromagnetic interference. Prepare for turbulence. The image of Captain Hayes flickered into the bridge displayer. Woman with determined eyes and a tight bun, clearly used to command her voice. Was calm, but the tension was unmistakable. We're ready to help, Rilthak replied steadily. We trust your crew's judgment. Seconds stretched into agonizing minutes as the two ships drew closer through the electric storm. Suddenly, a violent shockwave slammed into the Vrithax. Brace for impact, Rilthak ordered. The ship lurched violently. Crew members stumbled, clinging to railings. Console lights flashed red. Warning, klaxons screamed. Shields at 20%. Yalek shouted. If this keeps up, they'll fail completely. Odyssey. Rilthak's voice was sharp. Experiencing the same, came Hayes' reply. Adjusting approach. The human ship surged forward, weaving through the nebula's violent currents with uncanny agility. The Vrethax's crew watched with a mix of awe and disbelief. Humans had a reputation for taking risks no other species dared. Look at them, murmured Lieutenant Rinnell beside Rilthak. They're almost dancing with the storm. Or courting disaster. Rilthak replied grimly, suddenly. The Odyssey's tractor beam locked onto the Vrethax, and a tense pull began. Hold steady. Hayes' voice crackled through the channel. We're bringing you out. But the nebula wasn't done with them yet. An enormous burst of charged particles ripped through space, slamming into the Vrethax's damaged hull. Alarms blared as systems flickered out. Hull breach in Sector 7. A damage control officer shouted. Rilthak gritted his teeth. Seal it off. All hands to damage control. Rennell led a squad rushing through smoke-filled corridors, emergency lights flickering ominously. The hiss of decompression was faint but terrifying. We don't have much time, she said. Patch the breach before the atmosphere drops. The team worked frantically, welding emergency seals and rerouting airflows. Outside, the nebula howled like a beast enraged. Back on the bridge, Galactic struggled to keep the reactor stable. Sweat dripped from his brow as he rerouted failing conduits. We're losing the main power grid, he warned. If this goes, life support goes with it. Tell the Odyssey to speed up, Rilthak snapped. Our window's closing. On the Odyssey, Captain Hayes stood at her own bridge, commanding her crew with steely resolve. Hold formation. Adjust shields to compensate. She barked. Despite the dangers, the humans refused to yield. They pushed deeper into the nebula, their confidence bordering on reckless. Why do they risk so much for us? Rilthak wondered aloud. Yalek shrugged. Humans, they don't quit. Not easily. Minutes later, the Odyssey's engineers managed a risky maneuver, sacrificing some shield power to fire a concentrated pulse that temporarily cleared a path through the nebula's worst now. Hayes ordered. With a sudden surge, the Odyssey's towing cables engaged fully, pulling the Vrethax inch by inch toward safety. The crew's spirits lifted slightly, but the battle was far from over. Suddenly, the sensors beeped wildly. Multiple unknown ships appeared on the edges of the nebula, fast-moving, hostile, and heavily armed. Unidentified vessels, the tactical officer reported, tension thick in his voice. They're closing fast. Rilthak's heart sank. The Vrethax was crippled. The humans stretched thin. A fight here would mean almost certain death. Prepare for combat, Rilthak ordered, voice cold steel. Captain Hayes, do you read? The comms officer called out. We're aware, Hayes replied grimly. This is about to get very complicated. As enemy ships burst from the nebula's shadows, lasers painted the void with deadly streaks. The rescue mission had become a desperate battle for survival. Rilthak glanced at the humans, fierce determination on the comm screen, and felt a surge of unexpected hope in this dark corner of space. Humanity's grit was about to be tested. The Vrethax's fate would hinge on an unlikely alliance forged under fire. The void outside was chaos, a violent ballet of flashing weapons fire. Jagged laser beams slicing through the nebula's swirling gases. The Vrethax and the Odyssey found themselves caught between two impossible odds: the merciless environment of the nebula and a deadly, unknown enemy emerging from its shadows. On the Vrethax's bridge, Captain Rilthek's normally composed features were etched with fierce determination. The alien crew scrambled to man their stations, but the ship's crippled systems meant their weapons were slow to respond and shields barely flickered. "We can't hold them off much longer," Rilthek said grimly, voice barely audible over the blaring alarms. "Odyssey's shields are taking heavy hits." The comms officer reported. "Hayes, what's your status?" Rilthek called out, voice strained but urgent. On the Odyssey's bridge, Captain Myra Hayes's face was lit by the red glow of damage warnings. She barked orders with calm precision, directing her crew to divert power to weapons and shields. But her jaw was tight. "We're holding, but barely," Hayes responded over the comm channel. "We don't know who these attackers are, but they're organized and heavily armed. Looks like they were waiting for us." "Ambush," Rilthak muttered, eyes scanning the sensor feeds. "They know we're vulnerable." Suddenly, the Vrethax's hull shuddered violently as a blast struck. The starboard side, sparks flew, and a wave of panic rippled across the bridge. "Hull breach in engineering deck." An officer yelled. Jalek, the chief engineer, gritted his teeth. "If they hit the reactors, we're done for." Rilthek's mind raced. They had no choice but to trust the humans despite cultural differences, despite lingering distrust. "Hayes, can you board us? We need your engineers on deck to stabilize critical systems." There was a pause, then Hayes's voice came steady but firm. "We're vulnerable out here, but it's our best shot. Preparing boarding party." Minutes later, through the crackling comms, the Vrethax crew heard the distinctive thrum of the Odyssey's docking clamps securing their ship. Hatch seals hissed open, and the first humans crossed the gangway, a group of engineers and security. Officers led by Hayes herself. The corridors of the Vrethax were narrow and unfamiliar, lit with an eerie bioluminescent glow. The humans moved quickly, assessing damage, working alongside alien engineers. At first, there was a cautious distance between the two crews' different languages, customs, and wariness, but the shared urgency began to break down barriers. Galactic briefed the human engineers on the failing reactor cores. "We must reroute power, but it's unstable. One mistake and we'll lose everything." One human engineer, a wiry woman named Leela, nodded confidently. "We've dealt with worse back home. Let's get to work." Meanwhile, security teams from both ships coordinated to strengthen defenses. The humans introduced unfamiliar tactics, rapid, aggressive strikes using smaller, more mobile units that surprised the aliens. Rilthok observed from the bridge, the tension between fascination and skepticism clear in his eyes. Their approach, it's reckless. Renelle, standing beside him, shook her head. "No, it's effective." Suddenly, an alert blurred a boarding pod from the enemy ship had locked onto the Vrethax. Rilthak's heart pounded. "Enemy boarding party inbound," the tactical officer announced. "Prepare to repel," Rilthak ordered, in the narrow corridors. The two crews braced for close quarters combat. Humans and aliens fought side by side, learning each other's strengths and weaknesses on the fly. Renelle found herself paired with a human soldier named Cade, whose easy confidence belied a fierce loyalty. "Keep your head down," Cade joked, under his breath as they cleared an enemy corridor. "Don't get yourself killed." Renelle shot back, a faint smile cracking her stern expression. They worked seamlessly, her precise alien reflexes blending with his improvisational style. Meanwhile, Captain Hayes and Rilthak coordinated a counterattack from the bridge, issuing orders through shared comms. For all their differences, a new rhythm emerged, a partnership forged in the fire of survival. After a brutal fight, the enemy boarding party was repelled. The intruders retreated into the nebulous shadows, but the cost was clear. The was battered, its systems barely clinging to life. Hayes turned to Rilthek as the last of her team secured the engineering deck. "Your ship won't hold much longer." Rilthak nodded slowly, a weight pressing on him. "Then we must get out of this nebula together." The two captains stood side by side, gazing out at the chaotic swirling clouds beyond the viewport. "We owe you our lives," Rilthak said quietly. Hayes met his gaze, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at her lips. "You haven't seen what humans can do yet." In that moment, despite the danger and distrust, a fragile bond had been formed, one that might turn the tide of their desperate fight for survival. The combined crews of the Vrythax and the Odyssey moved with hurried purpose through the dim corridors of the alien ship. The Vrythax's bioluminescent walls cast eerie shadows, flickering as emergency lighting sputtered from weakened power grids. The faint hum of damaged reactors was a constant reminder of the precariousness of their situation. Captain Rilthak walked alongside Captain Mira Hayes, their steps in sync despite their different gaits. The alien's slender frame was wrapped in the utilitarian uniform of his people, while Hayes bore the human starship captain's standard-issue battle-worn, practical, and scarred with the marks of countless encounters. "We can't keep patching this ship," Rilthek said quietly, voice low enough for only Hayes to hear. "The nebula's energy drains our systems faster than we can repair. We need to move now." Hayes nodded, her gaze sharp and steady. "Agreed. But without a functioning engine, we're dead in the water. Towing won't get us out of this mess fast enough if those ships come back." Their partnership was uneasy, but growing stronger. Days of shared struggle had bred respect, even if old prejudices lingered beneath the surface. Ahead, the engineers, human and alien, worked side by side, collaborating on complex rerouting of power systems. Leela, the human engineer, and the Vrythax chief engineer, had forged a tentative friendship despite their vastly different backgrounds. "You're not what I expected from a human," Yalek admitted as they examined the failing mainframe. Lila grinned. "Don't judge the species by its stereotypes. We're stubborn survivors." Yalek chuckled softly, a rare sound in the tense environment. That stubbornness might be the key to saving us all. As repairs progressed, an uneasy calm settled over the ship. The immediate threat of boarding had passed, but the looming danger of the nebula's unpredictable bursts and the possibility of enemy return haunted every breath. Back on the bridge, Rilthak and Hayes reviewed sensor data. The enemy vessels had disappeared into the nebula's swirling clouds. But the question lingered. Would they come back with reinforcements? "Do you think they'll follow us?" Rilthak asked. Hayes shrugged. "If they know what's inside this nebula, yes. They won't let us leave easily." Suddenly, a new blip appeared on the scanners, an unknown ship, but unlike the hostile vessels that had attacked before, it was large and moving cautiously. "Another ship," Rilthak murmured, tension tightening his voice. "Not hostile, at least not yet," Hayes added. Opening a channel, static crackled over the comms before a calm voice spoke heavily, accented but clear. "This is Commander Tarek, of the Galian Coalition. We've been monitoring your distress signal. We can offer assistance, but we require your cooperation and surrender of any recovered technology from this nebula. Rilth's eyes narrowed. The Galian Coalition was known for their ruthless political maneuvering and iron-fisted rule over several star systems. We don't surrender to coercion, Rilthak replied firmly. Hayes added, we're not in a position to negotiate from strength, but we won't hand over allies or technology to anyone threatening us. The Galian ship's sensors intensified, weapons powering up. The tension on the Vrithax was palpable. Rithak turned to Hayes. We face enemies on two fronts, the nebula, and now political forces. Hayes's jaw tightened. We'll need every advantage we can get. In the cramped corridors, word spread quickly. The alien and human crews prepared for what could be a fight far more complex than survival in the nebula. Lieutenant Rennell and human soldier Cade patrolled together. Their easy camaraderie a brief respite from the mounting dangers. You ever deal with politics like this? Rennell asked, glancing toward the viewport where the Galian ship loomed. Cade shook his head. On Earth, politics was messy, but this is a different beast. Survival first, politics second. Rennell smiled faintly. Maybe that's a good way to live. As night fell on the Vrethax's internal time cycles, an uneasy alliance, with forging not just between alien and human, but between survival and defiance. The crew gathered in the common area, a mix of species and languages, all bound by the desperate hope to escape the nebula alive. Captain Rilthak addressed the assembly. We will not surrender our home or our future to threats. We fight not just for ourselves, but for the generations yet to come. Hayes stepped forward, and we fight with you. Together, we are stronger. The murmurs of agreement grew louder. Differences set aside, united by a shared will to survive. But beyond the glowing nebula clouds, dark forces were mobilizing, ready to crush the fragile alliance before it could take flight. The battle for survival had become a fight for freedom, and the Vrithax and Odyssey would need every ounce of strength, courage, and unity to face what came next. The Vrethax and Odyssey crews had settled into a tenuous rhythm, patching the starship's broken systems while keeping an anxious watch on the nebula's shifting energy storms. Yet, beneath this fragile calm, darker forces stirred. Captain Rilthak stood on the bridge, eyes locked on the radar screen as it pulsed with incoming signals. The Galian Coalition vessel loomed like a vulture on the edge of the nebula, weapon systems glowing ominously. His commander's warning echoed in his mind. Surrender technology or face obliteration. We can't outgun them, Yalek said grimly, joining the captain. Our weapons are offline or unreliable, and the nebula makes maneuvering difficult. For everyone, Rilthik rubbed his temples. We'll have to rely on cunning and the humans. Captain Hayes entered the bridge, urgency in her step. We've run diagnostics on your propulsion system. With some jury-rigged adjustments, we can get limited thrust back, but it won't be enough to outrun the Galian ships. Rilthak looked at her, the weight of command heavy in his eyes. Then we stand and fight. Hayes nodded, or we make them pay for every inch. The Odyssey's crew moved with efficient precision, integrating human technology with the Vrithax's alien systems. Engineers from both ships huddled over consoles, voices low but determined. In the engineering bay, Lila and Yalek worked side by side, their hands a blur of quick repairs and recalibrations. I don't get why humans take such risks, Galactic said, tightening a circuit. Leela grinned. Because sometimes The risk is the only way forward. Nearby, Lieutenant Rinnell and human soldier Cade ran simulations on the ship's weapon systems. Their fingers flew over controls, programming new firing patterns and defense protocols. Your species fights dirty, Rinnell teased. Cade laughed. Only when it works. Their banter masked a shared resolve. They both knew the stakes. If the Galian coalition attacked, their lives and those of everyone aboard would be on the line. Suddenly, alarms blared across the Vrethax and Odyssey. The Galian ship had launched a squadron of sleek, black fighters, darting through the nebulous ion storms toward their position. Enemy fighters inbound. The tactical officer shouted, "RILTHAK," and Hayes exchanged grim looks. "Battle stations," Riltak ordered. The bridge erupted into controlled chaos. Weapons officers engaged whatever systems still worked, launching fragmented bursts of plasma and pulse fire. The Odyssey's fighters scrambled to intercept the Galian attackers. Outside the viewport, streaks of light tore across the void, the deadly dance of dogfights amidst swirling nebula gases. Rinnell's voice came over the coms, steady despite the chaos. "They're fast, but their shields are thin. Hit-and-run tactics keep them off balance." Cade's fighter banked sharply, firing a salvo that disabled an enemy craft. Got one down. But for every enemy lost, 2 more took its place. The Vrethax's shields flickered, stretched to their limits. A direct hit rocked the ship, sending vibrations through the hull. "Brace," Rilthik shouted. On the ground level, engineering crews scrambled to reroute power, fighting to keep critical systems online. Leela's voice cut through the coms. "Reactor is unstable. We need more time." Galec's hands moved faster, sweat dripping. "We don't have it." Meanwhile, Hayes coordinated her pilots with cool efficiency. "Cover the engineers. Don't let them get close." Fighters darted through the clouded void, lasers cutting deadly arcs. Rinnell and Cade found themselves fighting side by side in the thick of it, their synchronicity saving their skins more than once. "This is insane," Rinnell yelled over the noise. "Insane keeps us alive," Cade shot back with a grin. Suddenly, the Galian flagship clocked a massive warship bristling with weapons and shields. Its presence was an ominous shadow over the battlefield. "Prepare for their main assault," Hayes warned. Rilthek's voice was calm but firm. "We fight not just for ourselves, but for every soul depending on us." The Odyssey and Vrith surged together, battered but unbroken. The battle for survival had become a war for freedom, and every moment was a testament to the fragile alliance holding them together. Asterisk. The Vrethax groaned under relentless assault as the Galian flagship loomed ever closer, a dark leviathan cutting through the nebula's swirling gases. Its weapons glowed ominously, casting eerie red light across the battered bridge. Captain Rilthik's hands trembled just slightly as he gripped the command console. Years of service had taught him to mask fear, but this battle, this fight for survival against overwhelming odds tested even his steely resolve. "Captain Hayes," he said, voice low, "we need a desperate move. We can't outgun them, but maybe we can outsmart them." Hayes met his gaze, eyes sharp with determination. "I'm listening." Rilthuk tapped into the sensor feeds. The nebula's electromagnetic storms disrupt energy fields. If we can lure the flagship into the heart of the storm, their systems might fail. Hayes considered the risk, then nodded. "We'll draw them in, but it means getting closer. Closer. Means danger for both our ships," Rilthak warned. "Then we make it count." Hayes replied. Orders echoed through the combined bridge. Pilots tightened formation, readying for the hazardous maneuver. Outside, the Vrithax and Odyssey slipped deeper into the nebula's eye. The violent storms, crackling with charged particles and arcs of lightning. Enemy fighters swarmed, lasers blazing. The Allied crews fought fiercely to protect their leader's gambit, shields at 50% and dropping. The tactical officer warned. Rilthok and Hayes exchanged a brief nod, steeling themselves. Then the flagship surged forward, following their bait into the electric tempest. For a moment, the nebula seemed to swallow. The battlefield lights flickered, systems flickered, and gravity shifted. Energy surges, disrupting weapon systems, Yalek reported urgently. Their shields are weakening. Now's our chance, Hayes ordered. All fighters target their weapon arrays. The Allied fighters responded, weaving through the chaos to strike at the flagship's vulnerable points. Explosions rocked the behemoth, its retaliation slower and less precise. On the Vrithax bridge, Rythak allowed himself a brief moment of hope, but the flagship wasn't finished. With a terrible roar, it unleashed a concentrated plasma blast, striking the Odyssey port side. The human ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring. Damage to life support. Hayes shouted, "We can't hold much longer." "Hold on, Captain," Rilthak said, voice steady. "We're coming to your aid." The Vrithax shifted position, exposing its less damaged side to draw fire. The humans quickly adjusted, launching repair drones to stabilize the Odyssey amid the chaos. The boarding pods launched again, this time targeting the Odyssey. Hayes' security team scrambled to repel the intruders in brutal close quarters. Combat. Below decks on the Odyssey, Hayes found herself in the thick of it, fighting alongside her soldiers. Her hands were steady, but her breath quickened as enemy fighters closed in. "Hold the line," she commanded, firing a pulse rifle that sent an attacker crashing to the deck. Back on the Vrithax, Ronell and Cade led a counterattack to clear enemy boarding parties from vital systems. Their teamwork, honed through countless drills and desperate skirmishes, was a beacon of hope amidst the destruction. "We've got to stop these pods," Ronell shouted over the comms. Cade grinned fiercely. "Watch and learn." Together, they fought their way through narrow corridors, clearing the way for engineers to regain control of the ship. The battle reached a crescendo as the flagship, crippled but not defeated, powered up a final devastating attack. "Brace for impact," Rilthek yelled. A searing beam of energy tore through the nebula's haze, aimed squarely at the Allied ships. The Vethax and Odyssey braced, shields flaring to their limits. Then, in a desperate gambit, Hayes ordered her pilots to break formation. Scattering to create openings, the flagship's beams splintered, energy dissipating into the nebula's storms. Seizing the moment, the Allied crews launched a coordinated assault, hitting the flagship's core reactors with precision strikes. A blinding explosion shook the void as the enemy warship erupted into fragments, swallowed by the nebula's swirling mists. Silence followed a heavy, profound silence, broken only by the groans of damaged ships. On the Vrithax bridge, Rilthak exhaled slowly. "It's over." Hayes nodded, exhaustion and relief mingling in her expression. For now, the Alliance had survived the breaking point, but the scars ran deep, and the future remained uncertain as repairs began and crews tended to the wounded. Rilthok and Hayes met once more, their bond forged in fire stronger than ever. "We faced the darkness together, Rilthek said quietly, and we emerged stronger. Hayes smiled, tired but unbowed. Humans never back down, neither should you. In the vast silence of deep space, hope was a fragile spark, but for these unlikely allies, it burned brighter than ever.